Welcome to Brand Formula, a new podcast focused on the marketing and brands at play in Formula One today. I'm your host, Mordecai, and my co host is Alyssa Margulis. Say hi, Alyssa.
Hello.
Between us, we have 30 years of marketing experience across agencies, in house at brands, digital platforms, content studios, and more. We're also big F1 fans. Alyssa was raised on F1 from childhood, and I am a Drive to Survive COVID convert. Each week, we will bring to you our takes on the brands around F1, the teams, and the drivers themselves. We'll analyze the advertising and marketing moves being made, the audience as it continues to evolve across markets, and look at white spaces we think need to be covered. Who is seeing an ROI and who's DNF'd? Now, let's talk the brand formulas shaping F1 today. Welcome to our episode 5. Thank you for listening, and please support us by liking, subscribing, and following us, all of the things. We are everywhere as at Brand Formula Pod. Welcome to Brand Formula. It's episode 5, and we are at the start of the 5-week slump. The
Oh,
unexpected
sad.
spring break. Oy, oy, oy. I mean, we would have always had this weekend, but it's like, it's just feels the surmounting pain of just knowing we are in this like hot tease, no date phase.
It is. It's funny you say hot because I also think from a social media and a F1 conversation and creator perspective, there's a lot of hot takes that are happening because we need to engage. We need to talk about it. That is a part of what being a Formula One fan or spectator or deep rooted lover of it means. And so it's been a little weird, I think, because there's just a lot of chatter that is going on now in this slump since we don't have actual races to talk about. So really curious what happens over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a really good example of that sort of age-old question of like, if you had all the time in the world, what would you do? And this week, we kind of got to see what they would do. You know, we don't hear anything from Max, but everyone wants to talk about him. Lando and Carlos are together golfing and in Madrid doing their karting thing, which we'll talk about later. But you really got to see everyone be like, oh, wait, I have no brand commitments and I have an open schedule. What would I do with myself?
Exactly. And then from a PR perspective, so much of the conversation is now shifting to what's going to happen from a regulation perspective, from an FIA perspective over the next 5 weeks, which has given us a whole other breadth of conversation to open up. And everybody has thoughts, feelings, and opinions on what it should be and what it can be. We also saw some numbers come out in terms of viewership of Formula One over the first couple of races, which has definitely opened up a bit of a conversation from both a marketing perspective and just a reality perspective. What's true and what is a bit of smoke and mirrors? Because, I think we went into this season seeing this insane explosion of fans and viewership in 2025. The movie obviously drove part of that. A fight for the title drove part of that. And so all these numbers came out about how amazing the viewership was. And now you're seeing maybe that's not actually the truth as the season is going on. And we're seeing a bit of a drop. So, how do you sustain brand presence from a Formula One brand perspective? And also, what does that mean to the marketing and the brands that are partnered with Formula One? Story for another
Yeah,
episode.
I mean, it is, but should we talk a little bit about it?
Let's do it. We're
Let's see
us.
how it
Why
goes.
not?
Let's just fuck it and go. Um, when one of the things about this I always hold to is, because I grew up a punk. And so, as like Nirvana got big, like everyone hates on Nirvana all of a sudden. Like they became a bad band because they got so popular. And so a part of me, as I was watching some of the content creators that came up on TikTok around the viewership, it was a little bit like, oh, this is an excuse to get you to stop watching. Like, that's what we want to propel forward. But, it is both sides of a coin. And I don't think we have a right answer here. But I've also seen some really interesting points, which is, the viewership in Spain has gone down a bit. Alonso has a horrible car. Signs is having a difficult three races, which is all we have to go on right now, and we have 5 weeks to chatter a lot. So this is a part of the problem. But also Italian viewing has really
Oh,
risen.
like
Right.
35%.
Yes. And the YouTube numbers have doubled, while the Apple streaming is having a little bit of trouble, I think, really latching on. So it's sort of like a lot of maths need to be done at where we really are with this in the grand scheme of things, because that diversification is happening and how people engage is forever changing. I am a person that I watch it all. I do think it's interesting that people are really complaining about it as, is it the regs? It's because there's horrible racing. But most people that I watch are like, yes, there's a lot of issues. No one wanted to see Ollie Bierman go into the wall the way he did and have that happen. But at the same time, the kind of yo-yoing is a little bit fun to watch.
Yeah, there's a balance to be had, and I think you hit it. There's no perfect magic wand that's going to be waved and make everybody happy. That is just not going to happen. And we have to remember at the end of the day, it's a sport that is reliant on individual manufacturers making a car. That is why we have a constructors championship. If you want to watch motorsport racing, that's the same cars every year going around the same tracks. There are plenty of options to watch that. Being a Formula One fan means buying into a little bit of the chaos that comes with it. Now, you also have to remember it is controlled by a board and money, and there are decisions and reasons that things are changing that have nothing to do with racing. So you also have to understand that as a fan and make those choices about what you care and what you don't care about. So everyone can have an opinion. That is kind of what being a fan is being opinionated. So I'm good with that. And I don't know if I formed my own opinion yet around what I want to see and what I want to change, but I agree. I'm kind of enjoying, other than yes, the safety concerns not enjoying, but I am enjoying this racing a bit more than I was last year. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Mhm. I mean, I think that Charles in particular is so good at racing his teammates. You know, I have sat at the edge of my couch like when he was with Sainz, and I've done the same thing with Hamilton, so I'm giving him the credit here. I think Lewis knows really good, like, is an incredible wheel to wheel racer as well, but just the two of them, I mean, that's fascinating to watch because it's all skill. And I've really appreciated the commentators making that very clear. Like, all people are talking about is the regulations, but a lot of this has required really opening up that encyclopedia of knowledge about all of the different tracks and all of the different curbs and being like, no, I can do this here. This is what's going to happen. And that has been really like fascinating to watch, particularly with Lewis, because people have been like, no, no, that was just Lewis Hamilton doing that.
Yes, go back 10 years and you will see that is coming from a lot of muscle memory. And, hopefully we see Fernando and Checo and some of the more seasoned drivers that are stuck in the back right now get to show some of those same skills. I mean, these are drivers that can close their eyes and drive a track. That's how much it is literally built into their bodies, into their minds. And so, knowing your car, knowing the track, knowing your own ability, and those are the drivers around you is what makes Formula One interesting and exciting. And again,
Mhm.
to me, you have to buy into that and be okay with that to be a fan. If you want to just be a casual fan and have hot takes, by all means, go for it. I don't necessarily need to see that commentary on my FYP. I'll stick to the people that ride the line between true fandom, technological information, and just fun.
Yeah, and it's definitely something we'll continue to watch for, but at the same time, this is such a fast-growing sport. When we talk about the white spaces that we've covered, even in our few episodes to date, looked at that. We're looking at new growth in certain sectors. That's not changing. We're talking about a few numbers in a period of a huge spike. So the in person, it's almost impossible to get a Grand Prix ticket in general. Like they all sell out and they're a very high price point. You can get, I think, like 5 World Series tickets for what it costs to go to one Grand Prix.
Exactly. And, with Miami being a month away, I think it's now is a really interesting time for this conversation between fandom, marketing, experience. We talked a little bit about it in our last episode, but having this break from two races, which tend to be a little bit less marketing forward, and jumping from the Japanese Grand Prix into the Miami Grand Prix is going to be really, really fascinating to watch where and how this kind of technological side mixes with this fandom side, mixes with the brand side, because Miami is an unbelievable marketing machine in and of itself.
Yeah, and going back to that comment I made that we're getting to see what people would do if they had all the time in the world, what we wanted to focus on today was just beginning to sort of uncurl what these driver brands look like. Because, like any great sport, people are not just sportsmen in this case, that they are actually going out there. They are brands that people are investing in. We have, one of the, like, the LeBron of the sport is Lewis Hamilton. And so we have a pinnacle in that. But then we also have, a one time world champion that's trying to figure out what his brand is going to be like out in the world. And he has some interesting things. So we wanted to just take a little bit of time and really look at the categories that they're playing in as drivers as they continue to build their brands. I think there's just so many interesting stories about that many of us don't see the whole picture because a lot of it is also territory based. They always talk about the British bias, but I will see more Williams Duracell ads than anyone else who's not in England. Like that's just the way it's going to be. And the easiest place to start in terms of categories that drivers are investing in is being an entertainment brand. So, being a content creator, not in the way that we're playing in ourselves, but really, what are the verticals of content and entertainment that they want to own and not just participate in? And we can start very easily with what Lewis is up to, but we'll probably breeze through it because, again, Lewis is the pinnacle. So there was the Formula One movie, and Lewis was a producer with his Dawn Apollo. So now it's an Oscar winning film. And as you mentioned in one of our early episodes, they're all early, but the very earliest, it was the theme also to the season. Damson Idris is in there talking about things. So, what do we think about Dawn Apollo and the blockbuster magic of Formula One, where the sequel will not be F2?
I mean, talk about marketing, and I can't wait to see what they name this second movie. Lewis is really interesting because he's kind of created a blueprint within Formula One, and you also can't take away the fact that he is the only Black driver in Formula One. He has had to create more of a conversation around himself, his history, how he got to Formula One. He has a personal brand that has been able to also be very separated from Formula One. And he's seen how other sports figures have been able to do that and build brand worlds around themselves, around their own stories, around how to engage fans in more than just a name way, but in an actual emotional connection. And then I think that's really impossible for any other driver to replicate. And so to me, he is exactly what it means to have a cultural brand at the center of Formula One. And culture is such a word that is overused, especially in marketing. I try every day to take it out of my decks because it says everything and means nothing, or it means everything and says nothing. And it's a really difficult word to try to define. But for him, it makes sense because he actually has changed the conversation. He has been able to create a brand for himself that is so much bigger than just himself. And I think that's the really important thing to look at, is that while he used his own success and his own, and you can debate whether he's a 7 or 8 time world champion. At this podcast, he's an 8 time champion.
He's 8. Yeah.
Look it up if you don't know what we're talking about. But he's been able to take his unbelievable power as a driver, his success as a driver, and not just use that name to get more money. He has been able to use it for activism, for putting his name and his creativity into spaces that mean a lot to him, that don't feel as connected to F1 as maybe naturally seem: fashion, entertainment, chairing the Met Gala, being a part of movies, co-writing movies, pitching content, creating his own lines. So I think that this is going to be something that is unreplicated in other drivers. And to your point about Lando, is probably looking at someone like Lewis and thinking, okay, what do I do? How do I build longevity like he's been able to? And I think everybody needs to find their kind of individual lane. There'll never be another Lewis, and there'll never be anyone able to build the world around himself that he has.
And that's important advice for anyone who's mentoring anyone, is there's only one you. But Lewis's peers are not on the grid. Lewis's
Nope.
peers are much more, in the public eye. And I think that allows for him to do things like the Formula One movie, which we will discuss in another episode, but which I will just simply say is not sport accurate.
Not at all. Suspend belief, as I think I told you before you watched it. Do not
Yes,
go
yes, yes,
into it
yes.
thinking that this is a movie about Formula One. It is
Yes,
inspired by, in the same way that
correct.
Maverick is inspired by Navy pilots. So just that's all we'll say
Absolutely.
for now.
But I think that's important, and Lewis plays in all of the areas that Lewis. So he has something visible as a brand side. So he has the Dior partnerships, he has the Lululemon, he has Neat Burger, because he's vegan. He has Almave, the alcohol brand that's non-alcoholic spirit.
I really respect, from a marketing side and also a personal side, when you're so in the public eye and so many people have expectations around you and are wondering, what are you going to do, who are you going to partner with, where are you going to put your time and your energy next, that he is keeping something that is for himself for now. Who knows what
Mhm,
that future looks like? And I think a lot of people obviously talk about him retiring in the next couple of years, and where is all of the energy that goes to racing going to go? Which of these ventures are going to go to the top of the list? And
mhm,
I just don't think we should guess, because that's the part that also makes him so fascinating as a marketer of himself. Is there's not so much a blueprint. There is
mhm,
unexpectedness, and then there's also obviousness. It's obvious that Ferrari fashion was going to become more of a focus for Ferrari as a brand when they signed Lewis. That was an obvious crossover of him bringing his passion, his contacts, his ability to get people interested into something that Ferrari had kind of been dabbling, frankly, a bit in. So
mhm.
maybe the Formula One movie, not F2, number two, will be scored by him. Who knows?
Who knows? I'm gonna put a pin in the fashion conversation because we'll cover that just a little later. But then we also have, Max Verstappen, who in the entertainment world, he doesn't trade on. I mean, yes, he has Verstappen Racing, so we're not saying that he hides his brand, his personal brand, but he really is all about the sport of racing. And so not just F1 racing, we know that he does for himself going off, but the fact that he has his team, so his Verstappen.com racing team, he has sim racing that he does. He's a primary investor in Team Redline, and he has really figured out those sponsorships around esports, and that is the area that, if you want to know about Max, he's like, I'm a sportsman. So anything I touch, I mean, he has the territory ones like your Heinekens and your things that are sort of just like pure money for, whatever. But many time world champion Max Verstappen, we have him out there really that's all he cares about is he wants to build the brand of racing and wants it to continue in all of its many forms for as long as possible. Seems is really his brand. That's it.
Yeah, I think if we're thinking from a marketing perspective and we were writing a brief and we were talking about the different archetypes, we would say that Lewis is the cultural archetype and Max is the performance archetype. He's really about racing and performance, and he wants his brand to be the same on and off the track. And so those are two very different lanes you go in. And why I think you and I have grown to appreciate Max in a different light, probably over the last 2 years in our conversation. Though we will
Mhm.
not be putting blue on anytime soon. There is a respect that has grown because he has really been very, very focused on the sport, on him in the sport, on where the sport can go into the future. That's not only something that was passed down to him, I think it's something that he was literally born with in his genetics. And he brings a global mindset, which I think is really interesting from that performance perspective, where how can motorsport in general, not just motorsport in Formula One, grow across the world, bring new people in, whether that is sitting in front of a sim or that is starting entirely new lanes for new kinds of racing, new kinds of teams, which I think is
Mhm.
really important because we have to evolve, we have to think different. And if there's anyone that represents utter and total focus from a brand perspective on performance, it is him. And probably part of the reason, to your point, that he does not have a ton of endorsement deals, and he's also makes them pretty organic, which I also appreciate. He's not out there in a million commercials and doing all this press. He's wearing his tag watch. He is
Mhm.
drinking Red Bull. He's moving it along. I think one partnership that I really appreciate too for him, and also personally, I love going to the Netherlands. It's one of my favorite places. And, you know, Jumbo, the Dutch supermarket, is a big partner of his, and he is Dutch through and through. He loves where he came from. He loves his people and they love him back. And I just love that he also just partners with something so local and to really bring that local fan base along. And he's a global star
Mhm.
still with individual local sponsorship, which is really cool to see.
Absolutely. The orange wave lives well for him.
Mhm.
Then we have Lando, our most recent drivers world champion, and he has had an interesting journey building an entertainment brand. So, several years ago, he decided to put out Quadrant, which was really a kind of mixture of like an influencer digital media group, is what I've always understood it to be. And it never really hooked in. So, Lando was sort of the only one in it. In 2023, it had a 400K negative equity because the Brits like to publish that stuff everywhere, just to say. And one of the things we saw in the week was we saw Quadrant come back. So Quadrant came back in a very, very short Instagram reel and TikTok, but vertical video of Carlando. So the duo of the mostest, Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris, doing a karting challenge and showcasing that Quadrant would be covering karting now. They've added some other YouTubers into the mix, and also, Lando has invested some of that world championship money back into Quadrant to see if this can really come together. But it's doing more than just Lando, more than just F1, but it is a bit of a Hail Mary that came through this weekend. And, one of the things to just point out with why it had to happen over this, particularly for his British audience, this is a dead weekend. It's a 4-day bank holiday weekend. So most people are just not present. The sun is actually shining in England right now.
Oh,
So people aren't really
shocking.
there, right? But they're going to show this. because they're also in that weird grace period of these personal brands really being able to operate right now. So it should be a fun month for this because, it's that thing of Lando can't wear his other gear. He has to wear, Puma during this time period, Thursday through Sunday. And so now you have 4 weeks where they can start playing in their brands because those requirements are not there. Now, you're still not going to see other watches in any photos, but they can play a little bit more than they're normally allowed to. And so part of that was Lando brought Quadrant back with Carlos. Now, what do we think? Do you think that he can bring this gamer brand and karting into a real platform and opportunity for the future of content creators in this space?
Me, Lando is back to thinking about archetypes. He is kind of that digital native entrepreneur archetype. He's the new generation that is thinking about how to build something. I am on the fence, to be honest. I don't know that Lando has been able to really grasp building something for the future. And so I hope that the conversations in bringing Quadrant back was not about, okay, how do we capitalize on being a first time champion, on all of this added press and money and fame that came his way. I hope it was, how do we build something to extend the sport, bring in new people into the sport, bring new stories from the sport to new audiences, because I don't want it to be a grab on world champion fever. I think he can build something that is more for this different type of fan that is more digital native, maybe is more tapped into gaming, karting. That is a micro, it's probably not micro, it's millions and millions and millions. But if you were to split a general fandom up into different communities, if Quadrant can focus on that community and stay core to it and core to how it can grow over the next couple of years, then I think that it can be really successful. Where I don't think it can be successful is trying to be everything to everybody. So that's where I'm really looking at it. Does he have a strong strategic lens on where this can go? And how is he building all of these connected parts of his world into something that makes sense? Lewis, Max, they have a mission statement for where they're going. I imagine they make decisions by, does this ladder up to where I want to go for myself and for my brand? And Lando feels a little bit chaotic to me right now. To your Williams and Duracell, I have never been served so many Monster Energy ads with Lando over the last week. And then a big part of that is because, to your point, we have this break. He's getting out there. He can talk about all of these other things during this time when the racing is down, and it's feeling a little bit off. I'm not really sure where he fits in versus where his partnerships fit in. They're not feeling like that connected story around him yet. So that's really what I'm looking out for, and I'm hoping it's there. I think it's necessary. It's just needs to be necessary for more than a quick hit.
Yes. If there was a driver on the grid that I would like to do a consult on brand strategy with, it would be Lando. Because
Call
there
us, Lando.
call us, because there are some amazing first off, I think Lando as a person and a sports brand is a wonderful story. I think
Absolutely.
as a competitor, as a person, I there is a lot of meat on that bone for that. Like he's a good subject matter in that space. He's a participant in things. He's been very open and very of his generation talking about, his emotional health and so on. I think there's a lot of things to grab onto with him that are very organic, very natural to him, and there you can tell sort of how he is. And he follows, he does Sims, and he was just on, I know, the other day with Max and someone else. I saw them on my streams, and so, he is doing that. I think that his and what I don't know what you call it. I call it kind of like the Landino loops, but his green with the black sort of squigglies all around. What is that? What do you I call it, like I said, I call it the Landino loops. I know I'm wrong. I know they're
I
the
call it
squiggles.
the Lando squiggles. So I don't know if
Yeah,
either one of us is correct, and we should probably we'll figure that out after
it's
this.
fine. It'll be the name of the episode, whatever it is. But, I think it's a strong brand. I thought that his, area at Silverstone last year looked fantastic. So, like, there are these fundamental things that you're like in a brand deck. I start to see that there were some really good decisions. But to your point, the issue is there's way too many cooks in that kitchen. And I love his
Yeah.
friends, but I think I could probably name each and every cook that's in that kitchen. And I think it goes to the content play with Quadrant, where they went for really high end video production in this like Drive to Survive era, thinking that they needed to play at that. And that was unnecessary, nor was it a place when you don't come from content creation and you try to mimic that stuff, you are going to be in a debtor's game of production at that point.
I have an interesting perspective with thinking a lot about this, since from a social content creation future, we're in this weird pivot time where we're seeing a lot of investment from brands in higher end production in social media as entertainment. And I know people think that they're doing something new. And I know we've had this conversation. This is just old school branded entertainment made for a new platform, but that's a hot take for another day. It What I find kind of fascinating is I do think there's a real opportunity for these drivers to think about entertainment and higher quality storytelling as it relates to them as drivers, as it relates to where they're investing, and as it relates to their brand partnerships. You've seen a lot of really, really high quality content coming from either teams like on the Visa Cash App side, where they've actually created an entire branded entertainment studio to tell more social storytelling,
Mhm.
serialized, episodic content around the team and drivers. Genius, amazing. That has also been repeated by a lot of brand partners within Formula One. Marriott, uh, I love the content that they did last year. Really beautiful. And the drivers now need to make that decision if they want to invest down that path. And to your point, what's the mix of content that they need to make to maintain their story, to maintain their individuality? I don't want to see them all jumping on this trend to make beautiful content for social just because they see it being done or because they starred in it for a massive production that one of their sponsors did. There's a place for it. There's a place for their individual stories to be told in both your more turnkey, easy side of social content creation and also your higher level storytelling. But back to our point, there has to be a strategy to the whole thing. So, again, call us up. We're brand and entertainment experts. We got you covered on this.
Absolutely have you covered on this. And, also, you can't take the memo from what your sponsors had you do. Like, I think about the big content dump that MasterCard did with McLaren this week. So I think I know what Oscar and Lando's favorite food, favorite music is, like, just all of like the fun facts, which I'm not really fussed by, but that is a standard branded content sponsor play. Like, and yes, it gets a little bit of viral traction. People are reposting. Like, it does sort of what it does. But as a driver brand, your content, and this was where Quadrant went wrong, can not only be about you.
Exactly.
And it's going to be very important for Quadrant if they're going to go into the karting space, which they are. So they're thinking about having a Quadrant Academy. There's rumors of kind of like a junior F1 program. People know that karting is the beginning of it. I follow Kenzo Craigie all the time. I'm kind of obsessed. But to not digress into Kenzo Craigieland, but anytime you do, please follow him accordingly. But I think that could be really interesting to see how he develops that. I think there could be a really interesting series around sports mental health that Lando would do. He has a lot. This is what I mean by like, just call us, let's streamline this, get the cooks out of the kitchen, because there's so much opportunity for him because he is a good brand and he's still developing that narrative out. And I don't think he should feel the pressure that that narrative has to be him.
Exactly, exactly. And you bring up an interesting point just in terms of the bridge between mentorship and storytelling. And Fernando Alonso, great example of kind of a cross generational icon where he's now supporting that next generation, like you're talking about with Quadrant, and how is Lando supporting this next generation kind of leads me to think about he's doing it in this more macro way, and Alonso is choosing to do it in this more micro way by actually managing young drivers and helping them to advance through their career and really offering that kind of cross generational iconic status. And he's doing it in this way that is really about direct support. It's less about building this massive brand around himself and his own brand. It's really about how is he cementing the next generation? How is he taking his experience, everything that he has learned into what happens when he leaves the actual grid and is really just there in the paddock. So you know, just also love watching him. His brand is his radio messages, and hopefully that is also what he is passing on to his young mentee, Bortoletto.
I mean, I think it's the thing about Bortoletto. So, Gabriel Bortoletto, second year in Formula One, had one of the most horrific crashes last year. I just can't like talk about it without seeing that state car just fly all around. But his role, so Brazilian, which there is a talk about territories that invest. Like these are huge decision makers into how people have seats. We're not going to digress into it, but like Colapinto got that seat at Alpine because of how much money came with him into that seat. But with what Alonso is doing with Bortoletto is like Bortoletto is the one man Kit Kat racing team. If you've seen the ads, it's like he just sits there eating Kit Kats and it's a massive thing. He has a massive Motorola partnership. Um, just gigs that no one would have, but it's because his management is Alonso. So Alonso has a management company. Bortoletto is one of his drivers, and the way that he has been handling him to get that personal brand out there, there just you don't see any of that last year's rookie class, so second gen drivers this year getting the level of exposure that Bortoletto has. And you know, often people say in commentary about how Bortoletto is really you can tell he's going to have the career. Now, he is an amazing driver, of course, but he is very good at listening to his elders. He's very close with Max Verstappen, and he's very close with Fernando Alonso. And you can also tell the amount of respect he has for the Hulk, his teammate in this. And you are really seeing someone that knows not only am I going to learn from you, but you're actually going to give me the information to move forward. Because all of these men are also, these are not just brand deals like, oh, how you get better spotlight. These are very well negotiated financial decisions across the board. You know, Max has an entire management company just to make sure that he gets more out of a percentage than any other driver on the grid. That's how he was able to buy his plane and his boat is that he gets a higher percentage. So you're also seeing these brands of like, well, how are we going to make money in the future? And the Bortoletto as this sort of high-tech athlete is such an interesting journey. You know, he too has a lot of Brazilian financial institution backing as well. But to be the face of Motorola in Brazil and then the face of Kit Kat and that Formula One partnership for a second year driver, incredible.
It's huge. And I mean, it's very interesting. You know, he made one of the smartest moves as a rookie, which is surround himself by people that not only are technically powerful, have been in the sport, have been able to navigate team changes, regulation changes, decade changes, but people that are also able to monetize and to think about it differently. You know, drivers can't drive forever. So building a brand, building a retirement plan is really unbelievably important from the time that they enter the sport. And that, to your point, starts when you're in karting, when you are
Mhm.
maybe not even in the double digits yet.
Yeah. Um, And, Bortoletto being a global brand ambassador, that's like a 1.5 to $2.5 million contract a year. And that's a pretty solid contract for an F1 driver when it gets into those brand partnerships. And I know we've covered a lot of ground on this entertainment side, but before we go, we do want to just tee open one other category here, which is that Carlos Sainz is the male face of L'Oreal, and that is a $2 to $4 million contract. He was at Cannes with all of the L'Oreal walking the. They do a bit of a runway in Cannes. It was a bit of a vanity project that they do, but he is doing their men's grooming and is sort of replacing the older models that maybe couldn't be in the game anymore. It's a huge move to have that. So when we talk about bringing in different types of brands on the white spaces, we're not coming from a drivers need to have ladies blush and lipstick and eyeliner on the side of their cars. We're talking about brands that have a holistic opportunity on that grid.
Yeah, and I think what's really fascinating about him becoming a L'Oreal spokesperson is if you flash back 25 years, Michael Schumacher was actually a L'Oreal spokesperson and I believe was the first Formula One driver to partner with L'Oreal. And that was a very different time of advertising. And this is also a driver that was known as the Marlboro Man. He was famous for his red suit, and that brand just splashed all over him. But then he was also L'Oreal hair care. And so I love that Carlos is picking that up in a really modern day take on it. And he
Mhm.
also brings a humor to it that has such a crossover between generations, between genders, between consumers. So he was really the perfect choice, in my opinion.
Yeah, and also an example of a good brand book. So, he has the Hackett London deal, which he does with his father. His father runs the karting team, which is now featured in this Quadrant karting collab that he's doing. And it's like you have Carlos that really is showing up like this is my brand. This is my family's brand. This is who we are. Carlos is the smooth operator. So there we have it. And I know that we'll address many. Am just going to say I have a lot to say around George and Carmen's barrier facial line. I mean, the comedy writes itself. Let's just say that. And
No
if you
comment.
don't, no comment. I mean, the idea that the man that smacks himself into a barrier on the last lap calls his face cream barrier. Mm. Mm-mm-mm.
Couldn't
Okay.
have wrote it better.
Thank you all for joining us. We'll be doing a few other episodes around topics we hope you enjoy. But remember, marketing isn't about whose voice is loudest, but whose voice you'll remember. We look forward to continuing to talk about marketing and F1 with all of you. Who's seeing an ROI and who's DNF'd? Looking at you, Barrier. Please like, subscribe, and do all the following. We're building up our channels, and your support would genuinely mean the world. So goodbye for now, and lights out.
Lights out and away we go.